This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. If you like what you hear, as usual, please rate and review the podcast in the Apple Podcast Store or wherever you get this podcast. I want to welcome any new listeners to the podcast. If you are an ex-Mormon or currently a Mormon, I just want to welcome you to the podcast. I hope you find that what we're discussing here is fair. Feel free to let me know if that is not the case. If you happen to be an evangelical believer and you're listening, or an apologist, I predict that there will be moments during this conversation where you're going to say to yourself, "No, but Mormonism is wrong for X, Y, and Z reasons." First, I want to acknowledge that I completely understand why you might feel that way, because you've been told that. But you will have phenomenally missed the point if that's all you take away from this conversation. So please recognize the very similar aspects of the faith tradition, regardless of what the theological differences you might have with Mormonism. If you're one of my regular listeners, I want you to pay very close attention to how similar our stories are between Amy and myself. Even though we come from pretty radically different faith tradition backgrounds, this deconversion process is very strikingly similar regardless of what your faith tradition is. The process of recognizing cognitive dissonance, the process of allowing yourself to be curious and to go out and to seek knowledge. This process is really important, and it is fairly common across deconversion stories. In the middle of the conversation, I mentioned a blog post that I have called How to Deconvert in 10 Easy Steps. I'm going to have that as a link in the show notes as well. I hope that I was able to capture some of the commonalities of deconversion stories and the steps that we go through in that blog post. I'd love for you to read it and give me some feedback on that. On to today's show. My guest today is Amy Logan, the podcast host of the Exmormonology podcast. Amy has also done a YouTube channel called Amy Logan Life, and she is a certified life coach, helping those people come out of Mormonism. Amy Logan is the podcast host that I want to be when I grow up. She has been able to capture that sweet spot to speak to people who have not quite left the faith and are not yet able to maybe say that they are non-believers or atheists, while still being brutally honest and truthful. I highly recommend that you check out the Exmormonology podcast and all of Amy's work. We will have links in the show notes to various ways that you can get in contact with Amy. One final note here, we had a lot of lag and internet delay as the entire world decides to use Zoom all at the same time. So if the conversation occasionally is stilted, I've tried to correct for that as much as possible, but that is my fault and not Amy's. I think the content is so important, I hope that you will still listen all the way through. Here is my conversation with Amy Logan. Amy Logan, welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
I was just saying that I have listened to a number of your podcasts. The podcast is called Exmormonology. And although I am not or never have been a Mormon, I find it just amazing how similar the stories of deconstruction or deconversion are or is for you. And you know, I've just resonated so much. And I just so appreciate the tone that you strike there. It's a goal of mine to kind of reach that kind of tone. I think I fail at it much more often, but
I don't know, being called the Graceful Atheist is a good segue into a good tone, right?
It's the aspiration. That's what I'm trying to do. Yes.
Good. I love it.
I want to just begin with, first of all, I'll just say right on mic, you know, my ignorance of the details of Mormonism. So please correct me if I say something wrong, or if there's some piece of information that my audience, which would tend to be ex-evangelicals, might not understand. Feel free to just expound on that entirely.
Sure.
Let's hear your story. What was it like growing up in Mormonism, and we'll get to the doubts in a bit.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I want to start just acknowledging what you said about how our deconstruction journeys are so similar. We might have different verbiage per religion you're deconstructing from, but it's that same process.
Yeah, yeah,
So whatever spot you're coming from to get to through the deconstruction, it's quite an experience. So
yeah.
yeah, I hear you on that.
It's amazing what the resonance, right? Like
Yeah.
they're unique, but it rhymes. I say all the
Yeah.
time.
I always say we sing the same song.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
We get each other immediately because when you know someone's kind of gone to those dark places, you have an instant connection. It's almost no words need to be spoken, but it's good to speak them.
yeah. And just a final note on that, I feel like this, you and I speaking, and our listeners get to participate in the community that we're building, right? Like as we
Yeah.
tell each other stories, that is
Yeah.
building the community that we no longer have from our former faith tradition.
Yeah. Because I think that's one of the biggest things that you mourn is that loss of tribe, that loss of community.
Yeah.
And you've kind of flounder for a while, but we'll get to that. But yeah, so I was raised Mormon, pretty much born and raised in it. My mom was a convert at 16, and she was active in the Mormon church for quite a while. And then she went inactive for a while when she met my father, who was never a Mormon.
Okay.
And then they got married and had a couple kids. And she started going back to the Mormon faith at about, I think I was 4.
Okay.
So I consider myself being born and raised in it because she was always who she was.
Right. Right.
With that Mormon kind of thought process and all that goes with it. So yeah, I grew up in Southern California in Huntington Beach. And, all in all, I mean, I didn't know any different. I think when I was little, we went to the Lutheran church on and off,
Okay.
but not enough that I have any memory of it really. And so, yeah, I grew up the Mormon girl. And I think I would be interested to find similarities in personalities because I was the Mormon girl that did all the things. Like I wanted to be the exemplary young woman and obey the rules and being a good example. And I was very much a rules girl. And I think when you are a deep believer, and I would assume this is for whichever sect of religion you come from, that you want to do it right. Right. So my personality was very much like, well, I believe this. And it never crossed my mind to question those beliefs because all the people I trusted, right? Even though my dad was never a member, my parents divorced when I was 9 or 10, right around there.
Mhm.
And he wasn't super active in my life from that point on. And my mom quickly remarried and married in the temple to a Mormon. And
Right.
we were just the Mormon family. And so I grew up believing it. I did all the things. And in the Mormon church, you go to something called primary, which is like Sunday school for kids.
Okay.
And, the indoctrination starts pretty young.
Pretty young. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And so it just began. And then there's kind of a rite of passage where you just kind of do things in a chronological order. So you go to primary, it's fun. You sing songs and teachers will give lessons, and it's like an elementary school teacher teaching. I mean, not really an elementary, but it's on the elementary level is what I'm
Right.
saying. And it's fun and happy, and I loved it and had good friends that I went to church with. And in the Mormon world, you go to church with the people who live in your ward, and a ward would be like a parish or a boundary.
Okay.
And so that's just kind of your built-in community.
Yeah.
I could go anywhere. I could come up to where you live and just find a Mormon church and sit down and fully participate with all the Mormon lingo and the way they speak. And like, it's just the same all over the world.
Right. I do think that that's an important distinction, that it's slightly more ritualized, a little more ritual than maybe, and I'm trying to be careful here. Obviously, there's lots of different versions of Christianity, but
Yeah.
of the quote unquote non-denominational Christian that people try to hide behind sometimes. So it would
Yeah.
be slightly different.
Yeah, definitely. Which I think is great. I mean, so you can go anywhere and feel right at home. Like when we'd go on family trips, like we go to Hawaii or something, we always went to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
And we just find a local ward and go. And I think Mormons in general are actually very happy, good people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I even find myself defending Mormons to people who start to bash them, because I do believe fundamentally Mormons are people who are just trying to raise families and live a good life and be kind to one another. Now, we can get into the doctrine and it gets a little weird there, but generally speaking, that's my belief about kind of your average rank and file member.
Right. I often say I have no problem with believers, right? I love them.
Yeah.
They're my family, they're my friends. I've got
Yes.
believers everywhere.
Right.
And I defend them as well.
Yeah.
We can talk about the ideology and what's wrong with the ideology and still embrace the people.
Yeah. Right. Right. Which, yeah, definitely on board with that. So then, in Mormonism, so you kind of go through the ranks. At 12, I'll speak for myself, a young woman. It's parallel with the men path and the woman path, except the men or boys start getting the priesthood at 12. And there's a hierarchy there as well. Women, of course, don't have the priesthood, which is authority, speak for God.
Okay. All right.
And so, it's very conditioned. And of course, it's a very patriarchal society with men as leaders. Now, I'll get further down in my story where I was a woman leader in the church, kind of as much as I could be. But everything we did as women had to go through the priesthood. So I'll circle back to that. But I'll go back to just kind of that time. It's very 12, you get excited to go to Young Women's. That's where you meet with the girls from 12 to 18. And then within that, you kind of break it down. 12 and 13-year-olds go to classes together, 14, 15-year-olds and on.
Okay.
But it's just exciting. You get to be with the older girls and it's just fun and great leaders. And I kind of joke. So I was born in 70. Yeah. So now I'm in the 80s. And I kind of joke that the 80s, the church was true, because it was just a very fun time. Of course, there was no internet.
Yeah.
So there wasn't as much bombarding with information as easily found now. And, growing up as a young woman in the church, it was fun. Like the activities they had for us kids and like the girls' camp and the youth conferences and all the activities that they had for us were fun. And I loved it because, of course, the boys would be there and the girls would be there. It was just a fun time. The activities, we'd have Saturday nights, what they called stake dances. So this is where my Mormon verbiage comes in. So a stake is a collection of wards.
Okay.
So it's just a bigger boundary for the people.
Yeah.
And I loved it. We'd have beach parties, of course, out here in California, it was just so much fun.
Yeah.
So I had a very positive experience growing up in the church.
I'm glad you said that. Many, many people have very traumatic experiences, but it is important sometimes to recognize that not everyone has a traumatic experience, and that and one of the things that I say a lot is that the thing that religion does really well is community building, and community is a human need. And so, what you're just saying is I enjoyed being a part of a community and I felt fulfilled in that community.
Yeah, exactly. It was a fun time. Now, I think there were some psychological implications, like effects on me growing up. And I'm going to lead it into like when I got married. So I got married in 1990. I was 20.
Okay.
And I had graduated from high school, of course, living a very good, pure, chaste Mormon life, except for one boyfriend in high school. But you gotta have one, right?
Yeah.
But I bring that up specifically because I think there was so much shame, and we didn't really call it purity culture in the Mormon church, but there was so much shame tied to any kind of sexual relations with anybody beyond like kissing. Yeah. And so that type of, it kind of leaves scars, because if my boyfriend and I would fool around, the next day was full of me racked with guilt. And he wasn't Mormon. I think he went to the Calvary Church. Is that something you're familiar with?
Yeah, Calvary.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's it. And I just had so much shame. And so now as an adult, I can look back at just, also rites of passions with sexual experimenting and loving your boyfriend or whatever. So that's the kind of stuff that I think was more psychologically damaging for me than just growing up with what I thought the church was. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Because that kind of weaves its way through life. So the day after I graduated from high school, my family got in the car and drove me to BYU, which is a Mormon college in Provo, Utah.
Yes.
And it's funny because I think about it and it didn't even cross my mind to try to go to another school. Like, that's how Mormon I was. Like, you just go to BYU.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what else are you going to do? So I did that, and again, had a good time, met some great people, and I lived in the dorms. And BYU is a very, I don't want to say clean school, because I'm sure stuff was going on that I wasn't aware of. But as far as I knew, it was a very pure school. Like, our friends had just fun, clean fun. Like, we didn't
Yeah.
do anything. There was no drinking, because that's another thing, being raised Mormon. You have what's called the word of wisdom, which is kind of a health code that you subscribe to, which, like, no drinking coffee, no drinking tea, no drinking alcohol, of course,
Hmm.
kind of along that line. So it's a very strict health code in that regard.
Right.
So that, of course, wasn't allowed at BYU. Um, and then, of course, I got married a few years later.
Yeah.
I was just barely 20. I turned 20 in January and then got married in May to a great guy. And we were on what I call the Mormon plan. You get married in the temple. And the temple's an interesting thing, because it's kind of the goal of Mormonism to be able to go to the temple.
Hmm.
And in order to go to the temple, you have to pass an interview. And the interview has a ton of questions, kind of stemming from, do you believe Joseph Smith was a true prophet? And there's probably about 15 questions, and it may have changed a little bit. I've been out of the church since about 2000, officially 2009, but I started my faith crisis in 2006.
Okay.
So things have changed a little bit, but is everything, are you obeying the word of wisdom? Are you chaste, living basically a virtuous life? Do you sustain the prophets of the past, also the prophets of today? And are you honest in all your business dealings with men at large, not just men? And just along those lines. But what's interesting about it, when you're 12, so going back a little bit, you start what are called worthiness interviews.
Wow. Okay.
And you go into a room with the bishop or one of his counselors, and they ask you questions along the lines of, are you morally clean? Are you, like the ones I said, are you honest? Do you believe in the church? And all those types of things. So that worthiness piece of the puzzle, if you mess up in any way, shape, or form, which could, for me, someone who was very guilt-ridden anyway, you do something that might not be considered right? It just
Yeah.
evokes all this guilt, and you have to pray for forgiveness. Like, I was the kind of kid where we weren't supposed to take the Lord's name in vain. And when I was 10, they were having a party for someone in our block, and it was Lordy, Lordy, Jack is 40. And I remember reading the sign on the neighbor's yard and then running home to pray for forgiveness because I had said Lordy, Lordy. So just to give you some context about me and my brain.
A fascinating element here is there's just as much shame and focus on quote unquote worthiness and that kind of thing in evangelical churches, but it's implied, it's unwritten,
Okay.
which almost makes it worse. Not to compare
Yeah.
pain here, but
No, so how does that work, that it's unwritten? Like, how does that play out?
what I mean is you would probably not have a formal process where somebody would ask you those questions, but if you
Okay.
stepped over one of those lines, there would be a response, right?
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm finding the connection points
Yeah.
between
That's
the
so,
experiences.
yeah. And it's just kind of understood because, of course, controlling people's sex lives is just a way to control people in general.
True.
So if you go back in history, that's kind of a way you could control the masses, but which is still going on today.
True.
So yeah, so I went to BYU, started all that. It was my first experience away from home, just kind of the typical things, and then met the young man that I married. I was 19, and I did something that was like, we dated for a year and a half before we got married, which is very odd. Like, in the Mormon culture, it's lots of jokes about, oh, they met and they were married 3 months later, like that
Right.
kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
because you can't have sex, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of, we better hurry up and get married because we're not going to be able to wait.
Yeah. Especially at 19 or 20, that's a lot of pressure.
Oh my gosh. Yes, for sure. So I did get married, and we did all the things we did. I did graduate from college, which I'm very thankful for. And my husband at the time, we thought that this was, a good thing. So of course, education is always a good thing. And so one thing we did that a lot of our peers weren't doing is we did get on birth control, because that was kind of frowned upon. It was kind of a gray area. But we thought, well, it's better for us to get our education and then we'll start having kids. So we got married in the temple. And so backing up a little bit to that, the whole worthiness part is I was so Mormon that it didn't dawn on me to not get married in the temple.
Hmm.
And I bring that up because not everyone's allowed in the temple. You have to have what's called a temple recommend, which you have to be a member, you have to pass the questions. And one, of course, is, are you a full tithe payer?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a membership club,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
they wouldn't want to hear it referred to as that. But what that meant is my dad and my grandparents, who were never members, couldn't come see me get married.
Oh, no. Okay.
And I was so like, just had my blinders on that I just thought, well,
That's a choice they made.
yeah, which a lot of people on my YouTube channel have said kind of along those lines. Well, they just weren't worthy to go. And I'm like, by what's, I mean, I guess the Mormon standard, but that's just such a shame, as my dad and grandparents were crying outside the temple because they couldn't see me get married.
Oh, man. I think there's a lot of guilt for many of us of the things
Yes.
we've said or done to people
Oh,
we care
totally.
about in the midst of our faith, right?
Yes.
Because of that faith.
Yes, absolutely. You could have a civil marriage, which that's what it would be called if you had a wedding outside of the temple. But at least in the 90s, I got married in 1990, it was very frowned upon, because if you got married outside the temple, it probably meant that you had sex. At least that was the judgment people would place on it,
Interesting.
because you had to wait a year before you could get married in the temple after your civil wedding.
I see.
Which
Okay.
was kind of weird, because in other countries, the church does believe you obey the law of the land. And in other countries, they mandated that you have to get married, like not in public, but like where people could see it, that it was a real thing. Where in the temple, not everyone can go in.
Okay.
So there was that. So it never would cross my mind to not be married in the temple. So then I was married, young married, went to school. Like I say, I call it on the path for doing all the things. You also, when you go to the temple, start wearing the Mormon garment,
Okay.
which is basically underwear, but underclothing that you wear that is a reminder to you of the promises you make in the temple.
Okay.
And you're to wear garments night and day, like all the time, unless you're exercising, swimming or at the beach or something like that. And that's a weird thing to put these on.
Yeah.
And that's just what you wear forever. Like, that's a whole other discussion, but
Yeah, that is fascinating. And again,
yeah.
I think these are the differences, right? There can be varying degrees of high demand religiosity.
Yeah.
It strikes me that Mormonism is very high on that scale, in that you
Yes.
literally are wearing a set of clothing that indicates that
Yeah.
your adherence to that standard.
Yeah, exactly. And, that kind of stuff really gets into your head. And I was very much a believer and wore those and did, just like I said, continued to do all the things I was supposed to do. It's a
Yeah.
good girl, good woman. So graduate from school, get a job. It took us a while to get our first. I have 2 kids, 2 boys. And so I just kept teaching. I was a high school teacher.
Okay.
And then I had my son, and, a woman in the church, her highest thing in life is to become a mother.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I could have worked and done that, but like the drilling in my head all those years is that you need to stay home and raise your kids, which of course, once I had my kids, I wanted to do that. And I realized that's a privilege, and we were privileged enough that I was able to stay home. So I know that that's not everyone can do that. And I was thankful for that time in my life, but it was a decision I made to stay home.
Right. Okay.
And so I did. And then my son was born in 97. During that time, so this is important, because this was the first I wouldn't even call it a doubt, but like the first time I had this is weird happen.
I call that a glitch in the matrix. It's not
Okay, yeah.
It's not devastating yet, but it makes you go, huh.
Yeah. Like, oh,
Yeah.
this is weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
We call it a shelf. Like, it was the first thing I put on my shelf. Starts collecting dust. It's not huge, does it? But what it is I had my baby. He's probably 9 months, and my husband was in a leadership position in the ward. And for some reason, there was so much stuff going on that he was gone like 5 nights a week at the church doing church stuff.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, because, Mormons are big on family, like families can be together forever. That's kind of their tagline. And I remember thinking, this is weird, because here I am home with my baby, and he's just never here because he also worked full time. And so that was just one of the things. I just thought, okay, whatever. But then we ended up moving. So he didn't have that, it's called a calling. And he, like, if you're a Sunday school teacher, even a bishop, if you are the ward choir director, like those are what Mormons call callings. A bishop will call you in and say, will you serve as this position? So it just depends what you do.
Yeah.
I was like young women's president, primary president. So these are just kind of groupings, callings I had in the church.
Right. Okay.
So anyway, just to give you a little backstory there. So then we moved, and a year later I had my second baby, and I was too overwhelmed to be processing anything. I was just floundering, like this motherhood thing that I'm supposed to be my greatest calling in life was like overwhelming, like postpartum hit. I was like, this is not what I thought it was. This is hard. Two rambunctious boys who are the loves of my life, but it was just very hard time.
And the second child is more than double the work.
Yes, it is. It's like, oh, my life is no longer my life. Okay, I get it now.
Yes.
And then something happened. I was talking to a friend who I'd confided in. So my big issue, which started the ball rolling, was polygamy.
Okay, that's a big one.
Yeah. What I'll say is the sect of Mormonism that I practice, which would be considered kind of mainstream Mormonism, I think, doesn't like practice, like they don't have living wives. We can go into the whole deep doctrine about what happens in the next life, but it was still something, it was in our scriptures. And I'm like, but I don't get this. And I would talk to my husband. He's like, it's nothing we have to worry about in this life, which is like a conversation ender. Cause like, what can you say to that?
Yeah.
We don't know what happens.
Exactly.
So that was a little frustrating. And that was kind of the questions, the answers to questions I would get, like, well, we don't have to worry about it yet. It will work itself out later. So I had a girlfriend who we would talk a lot about polygamy, and we had a mutual friend who we had heard she'd taken off her garments. So when I say taking off her garments, I mean like making a conscious decision to no longer wear them.
Right.
And I remember getting this very nauseous feeling, like physically nauseous, like what, like, what? And it kind of threw me, and that kind of stayed with me for a while. And I had to go, coincidentally, within the short period of me learning about my girlfriend, I had to go get another temple recommend. So once you've been through the temple, you have to go, at that time, you had to go every year to renew your temple recommend.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah. You got to keep, you got to keep
got to be sure.
You got to check. Yeah. And I remember I had a bunch of questions anyway. And so in the interview process, when he was asking me these basically yes or no questions, I'd be like, well, I'm not sure. I have some doubts.
Yes.
And it was at that time that I was told that my doubts were of the devil.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, because here I am being the good woman, the good wife, the good mom, when did I have time to do anything that I wasn't supposed to be doing? Right. And the devil, like, I didn't feel like my life was bad or what I pictured the devil could be like. I was like, because I'm having questions, and that was very concerning to me.
Yeah.
Because, that was scary. So, but whatever, I put that on my shelf as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And I just continued on. And then the other thing in Mormonism that they tell you is not to read anti-Mormon literature. And I remember hearing that for as long as I can remember. And I think back in the late 70s, or maybe it was the 80s, there was a film that came out called The God Maker, or The God Makers. And it was kind of like, of course, this was pre-internet. So people I don't even know how they were seeing it, if it was a VHS, or I don't even know how that happened. I of course never saw it till like way years later, but
yeah.
And just stuff you're not supposed to read.
Right.
If you can control the information, you can control the people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So finally, I'm probably skipping a lot of stuff, but finally around 2006, I gave myself permission to do the deep dive.
Okay.
I was 36, and I couldn't get that nagging feeling. Now, this has been going on for years at this point.
Yeah.
But I was very dutiful. I had a good life by all intents and purposes. So I was like, well, why rock the boat? I'm good. I'm happy. But then I just couldn't handle it anymore. I had a girlfriend who was my best friend, and we lived near each other at one point. She had since moved away to Texas. And of course, I'm living in Utah all of this time too.
Okay.
And she called me one day frantic because I had confided in her. I just have doubts. I can't put my finger on it. Something's just not right. And she called me one day in a panic. Amy, you're right. You're so right. All the things you were doubting, it's so right. And she just spilt the beans that she had been through this faith crisis. And she'd read these certain books and she'd gone down these websites. And I was like, I had this moment in my head where I thought, I'm an adult woman. I'm 36 years old. If the church is true, it has nothing to fear.
Absolutely.
And then I thought, and I get to figure this out. So it was at that moment I gave myself permission. And my husband, he went out and he bought me a book. It's called Rough Stone Rolling, and it's by Richard Bushman. And it's actually sold in church bookstores. It reads like a history book. It was a very long book, but I was like, I'm reading this because I hate not know, like, what is this that I'm, my gut was speaking to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the time I was done with that book, it was, like I said, it was a history book. So it had basically the outline of the whole Mormon church. And he's still a member to this day. He kind of takes you to the ledge,
Okay.
and then leaves it. But it was enough that my brain was like, okay, no, I've been a member for 36 years and I have not known any of this stuff about Joseph Smith.
Okay.
It was basically about Joseph Smith and just how the origins of Mormonism started.
Right.
I was like, I could not read enough. Like, I was just this vessel that needed to get all this information that I've never heard before about something that I proclaimed to be true. And I was mad, but I was more curious at that point. So I finished that book, and then I just got more books and just read as much as I could. And I can't remember exactly when it was, but there was a time, and I call it the moment, after probably a good solid year of research and studying and pondering and trying to figure this out. Like, how could this be? Like, is it still true? Like, can the church still be true if all these things I'm reading just don't add up? So my kids are in elementary school. I'm driving home, so no one's home except my dog waiting for me. My husband's at work. And I come into the driveway. I'm driving my minivan. Pull into the driveway, shut the driveway behind me, and I had the moment that, like, it's all, can I swear? I kind of know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm like, it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
Every single thing I believed and held sacred and true, it's not real. Like, this just isn't real.
Yeah.
And of course I started bawling, like the heavy, ugly cry, like really bad. And I'm still in my car at this time. And somehow I managed to get myself out of the car. I go to my front room and I just land on my family room floor. And I literally prayed that the earth would swallow me up. Because I just like, I knew, I'm like, life's never going to be the same.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that it could get better at that point. I just knew that, like, I looked around my house and we built this house together. Like, it was this gorgeous, beautiful home. And I just looked around and nothing felt the same.
Yeah.
Like, and all of it was still the same. It was me that had changed, but it was like, now what? Like, what happens now? Like, I don't believe in this. And I'm not very good at faking things. Or I've never really tried to fake things before. But that was kind of the next step. So once I got myself up, and I just was like, okay, well, I still love my husband. I still love my kids. I still, like, at that point I was running my own business. I had a ceramic business that I was running at the time and doing little kids' hand and footprints. And I just, it was just that moment,
Yeah. What is amazing to me is, with the details changed, you are telling my story.
Really?
Right? I mean, and in fact, I may inflict this on you. I've written a blog post that I jokingly called "How to Deconvert in 10 Easy Steps," and you've basically, it's like you were reading that and
Oh my gosh.
ticking them off.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate some of them, the what I call precipitating events, but you talked about the shelf, right?
Yeah.
Just little nagging things that just happen.
Yeah.
Critical mass, when those get so heavy that it's just too much.
Yeah. The shelf breaks.
Exactly. And then the one that really identified is another blogger called this the curiosity killed the cat phase.
Oh,
And
I like that.
that's the moment that you say, I'm going to give myself permission to go look.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not changing my mind yet. I'm just going
Right.
to look. And you start reading and start researching it. And the end at that point is inevitable.
Oh, yeah. Right.
But then for me personally, literally having that moment of, oh shit, what am I going to do? How am I going to take
Ah.
my life?
Oh, yeah.
The world just changed.
100%. Like you might as well have just flipped it upside down. The rug's pulled out from under you, like all of those things.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
Yes.
So scary. And you just feel disconnected almost immediately from all of your family. Now, remember, I'm in Utah, where my family, like my mom's still in California. My dad had passed away in the 90s, so that was not a relationship that I had to worry about so much. But all my siblings were Mormon. Like my husband's family, they had a big family, and all the family lived within 30 minutes of each other. Utah's very Mormon, and I was just like, I felt like the odd man out, like what do you do? Like you just feel so scary.
Yes.
Yeah. So I get myself up, dust myself off, must have pulled myself together by the time everyone, kids got home, husband got home. And I just kept it a secret for a long time.
Okay.
So apparently I was able to fake it for a while, but it just doesn't work. Like you can't carry that load or I couldn't.
You're not being your authentic self, and that's painful.
Yeah. And that just makes you sick, and it's just not healthy.
Yeah.
So I must have told my husband somewhere in there, and he was actually pretty good about it. But for me, it was like, I'm like, okay, I'll just keep going to church. Like, how hard can it be?
Yeah.
Which is funny now looking back, but it's like, I would sit there with sacrament meeting was we had a 3-hour block of church meetings every Sunday.
Okay.
So you go to sacrament meeting, which is kind of where everyone gathers and you have your speakers and, singing and all of that. And then you break off and go to Sunday school for an hour. And then you break off from that, and the men go to their meetings and the women go to their meetings for the third hour. And one of the things is I would sit in Sunday school and someone would talk about like an apostate, right? And the lingo, how they phrased it was like, they're talking about me. Like I hadn't been public yet, but I started to connect more with the apostate in the story of whatever they were saying.
Yes.
And I was like, but I'm a good person. I haven't done anything except read some things and use my own critical thinking skills to kind of come to a conclusion for myself. And it felt so uncomfortable. And I would look around in Sunday school and I'd be like, okay, there has to be someone. Like I wish we all could wear like a little, I don't know, star on our forehead or on our shirt that can be like, I'm a doubter too. Like, I don't believe this.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen.
Like the Sneetches, we need a star.
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh. And so I just sat there feeling very alone. And I had listened to some podcasts that were kind of starting at that time and just hung on to them like a lifeline because there wasn't a ton of stuff. Like now there are a lot more people helping people process religious deconstruction. Maybe that was happening earlier. It just wasn't my time to notice, but it just felt very lonely.
Yeah.
And I remember I found this group. There was this website called New Order Mormon, which sounded super creepy too. Like I was like, what is this? But it was kind of a place for doubters, and it was a very respectable place. So it just seemed safe. And you had like I could come up with a name. I was wondering why, like that was my name, and you had like a fake picture of who you were, and you could ask questions, and so it was very safe. There was another group that was connected to that, was like kind of for all the irreverent people, which I wasn't ready for. Like I was like, no, I need to be doing my study. Like anger will come if it comes. I don't want to be influenced by I call them the angry people.
Sure. Yeah.
Now I get them, and I get the sense of humor 100%. But at the time I wasn't ready for it. So it was a 2-year process of really studying and processing in my head and trying to make sense of this and figuring out what to do. And so it's just a scary time. You feel very alone.
Yeah.
And I remember going to a luncheon that these people, like it was I don't know, this probably shows my ignorance of like the online world, but they were having a luncheon at a place in downtown Salt Lake. And I was like, I'll go. But I was scared out of my mind because I was like, are these people evil? Is it going to be God? Am I doing something wrong?
Yeah.
Like it just felt like, and I didn't tell my husband because I didn't want him to know. And it's just all those things because it's just so scary yet so private. And really what it is you coming to your own.
Yeah.
Like, so for the first time in my life, I was questioning things. I was being my own person, where up to that point, I felt like everything had to go through my husband, and I needed his not, he would never say that. He was a very good man. We're no longer married, but I loved him. Like, we grew up together.
Yeah.
We were together for 20 years. And so like, I understand him, but his paradigm didn't change. It was mine.
Right.
So here I'm trying to make sense of it all. And it just was just so scary, feeling that alone feeling.
This, again, and we'll maybe make a transition here to the work that you're doing now,
Yeah.
is what I appreciate about your podcast is that this is what I aspire to try to do. And I feel like I don't do it well, is just what you described. That person that's in the space where the angry people are over here and I don't relate to them. They don't make sense to me, but I know something's wrong.
Yeah.
And I want to find out what that thing is. And I feel like you have hit that precise bullseye. And so I'm trying to learn from you the same thing. I feel like, people see even graceful atheists and it's immediately turned off, right? I'm not going to get a lot of believers who listen.
Right.
And it's really easy to just, for me personally, especially in social media, it pulls out the worst in me, it feels like, to just be sarcastic or acerbic.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think what we need more of is what you are doing, right? Is a place where people who are in the beginning of their doubt can feel safe. It's the empathy that you express of, I've been there. You're not a bad person. You're not wrong for doubting. And at the same time, you don't have to be on this end where you're super sarcastic and
Well, just to be clear, I can go there.
Sure. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I've had my anger and, all of that, my snarky ways, and just feeling that, especially since I had two boys growing up in the church. So my husband and I divorced around 2009, 2010. Yet I had these two boys who were, because then what do? You're a parent. I taught them all the things.
Yeah.
So that's where my anger came, is like, okay, fine, I can leave this alone. But now I'm constantly reminded because now my kids are growing up in it.
I think our children have a way of showing us the ideology that we can't see for ourselves.
Yeah.
I had very similar for me when my girls were old enough to be baptized, was one of those moments where I thought, this is just not right. They don't have the capacity to make a decision like that.
What age do people get baptized in here?
They were like 7 or 8, somewhere in there, and maybe 9, but still way too young to they couldn't possibly, the whole idea of baptism was about, forgiveness of sin. They had no sin in their life.
Yeah. And in Mormonism, it's 8 years old as well.
Okay. And
I remember very distinctly walking into the church that I was going to when I was out, but in, like, I didn't believe it, but I was going through the motions.
Yeah.
And I was walking past the primary room where the kids are singing, and they're singing, follow the prophet, follow the prophet, follow the prophet. He knows the way. It's like, and I was like, oh my God, this is so much conditioning.
Yeah.
And that starts at 3. Little kids are in primary from 3 to 12. And it just was like nails on a chalkboard at that point. Like, I used to love the songs and I used to be the primary president. I used to just embrace it all. But once you look at it from a different angle, it's a whole different story. So yeah, Mormon kids are baptized at 8 and it's a big deal. And just starts the process of all the check boxes you're supposed to make if you live a good Mormon life. But yeah, because you're deciding to be baptized, you're forgiven of all your sins, which, first of all,
right. You're 8 years old.
What sins are there to be forgiven of? Yeah, to be a follower of Jesus Christ. But yeah, it's very painful.
One more point on this, and then I want to transition to just a different subject. You struck something I think is really important as well, that as you go through some doubting phase, and especially if you really have made a decision, I'm out of this, but you're still in the church context for whatever reason, that the things that used to be really meaningful, maybe the music, maybe the ritual, maybe a mantra, what have you, suddenly you hear the manipulation of it, right?
Yeah.
I like your term, nails on a chalkboard. So I spent about, I don't know, a year and a half going to church with my wife because I was supporting her after I had told her. And the hardest part for me was music. Christians don't tell lies, they sing them.
Oh,
I just could not get myself to sing the songs, even though I really enjoyed that aspect of church.
yeah.
I couldn't do it. It's like this, it's so untrue. It's so ridiculously untrue.
It's not just untrue. It's
Yeah,
so
yes,
untrue.
it's not even wrong. It's so bad.
I love it. Yeah.
But I think that is a fascinating, your perspective has changed. And then the sermons as well, right? I could hear the manipulation
Hmm.
and I just couldn't, I did so because I cared for my wife, but I could not enjoy it in any way because it was so far gone.
Right.
The subject that I wanted to hit on, and you have every right to say no to this, but it would be to talk about the prejudices of evangelicals towards Mormons.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear what your experience was while you were in the faith, and then I want to talk about it post-faith.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. So I spent I call it my 30-year stint in Utah. And I basically went to Utah for school, got married, all of that, stayed there till my kids were old enough. I came back to California. I'm back in Huntington Beach, just right where I want to be. But what's interesting about that is I had no idea how conservative and evangelical Huntington Beach is.
Yeah,
So I was a bubble within a bubble. That's how
yeah,
I refer. Growing up, I was in my Mormon bubble, not realizing the evangelical bubble. Like I just kind of, I wasn't aware. I had friends who were evangelical in high school, but I don't know. We were all just nice to each other. It was no big deal.
yeah, yeah.
But I remember being young, married, and I was down in Newport, and there was a evangelical person down by the pier or whatever, and we started talking to him, and it felt like you for sure couldn't have a conversation. It was very much what I call scripture ease, where it was just all
Yeah.
these scriptures being thrown in our face. And I was just like, what's the point of this? Like, this isn't, even in my Christian brain, it was like, this is getting nowhere. Like, this doesn't mean anything.
Right.
And so I tried to just never get sucked into that, even though sometimes I'd want to. Yeah, I know that they believe that Mormons aren't Christian, and maybe theologically, I don't know. I think Mormons, they proclaim to believe in Jesus Christ, but then you'll be told, well, it's not the same one, and this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
So as far as the prejudice, I haven't because I lived in Utah for so long. At the point of adulthood, I didn't have too many in my life, so I don't really have anything to compare it to except a few little like Bible bashing things that would go on in some random places.
So I'll just confess that.
Okay.
From the evangelical side, absolutely, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, various other sects were considered cult.
Yeah.
And there was lots and lots of apologetic arguments for the reasons why.
Okay.
And they would tend to be theological.
Yeah.
Like, so from my perspective today, all of that's ridiculous
for sure.
and insignificant. But at the time, and I imagine my listeners as well are going to recognize this, that there was an otherness. And that could include even all the way to Catholic sometimes, depending on how conservative the church you were in. So, and the reason I brought the subject up is that Mormonism was a small part of my deconversion. On my dad's side of the family, 90% of that family is Catholic, but there's a small 10% that is Mormon.
Oh, fascinating.
I didn't grow up with them. I was kind of away, but in my adulthood, as I was beginning to have doubts, I noticed that I had lots of Facebook requests from distant cousins who were clearly Mormon, just obviously overtly Mormon. And I thought, maybe I should at least look at what Mormon theology says.
Yeah.
Not in the sense of I want to be a Mormon, but just like, I know I can hear the propaganda, the way that it is presented to me that Mormonism is wrong in this way or that way. So I should at least look at it for myself. I did not do a super deep dive, but the number one thing that just leapt out at me was the concept of the witnesses,
of the Book of Mormon.
Of the Book of Mormon, that basically you have, in effect, signed affidavits of people saying, yes, Joseph Smith had this experience and this is the truth. And the reason why that's significant is in the apologetic world, there's a huge emphasis on Paul referencing the 500 people who witnessed Jesus' resurrection.
Okay.
If you actually think about that logically, that's actually one person, Paul, claiming that there were 500 people.
Right.
So, but there's so much emphasis on, all these people saw Jesus after his resurrection. And for me, especially at the ending part, I was desperately hanging on to the resurrection. If the resurrection was real, like, and I mean this literally, like it says on the tin, then I was a Christian. And if it wasn't, then even Paul says, then we're of all people most to be pitied. And I was right on that edge. And when I recognized that the same apologetic arguments were actually better for Mormonism than for Christianity in general,
Yeah.
and my biases were that Mormonism wasn't true,
Right.
that reflection right back. And I want to acknowledge here, this is prejudice.
Sure.
I'm not saying this was a good thing at all.
Yeah.
It did put a mirror in front of me to see, the things that I think are true, and I have all my reasons, are on the exact same footing as the witnesses for Joseph Smith, which I don't think is true.
Yeah.
And the other thing that struck me was, both with Mormonism and then a brief look at some Scientology things, is that these are brand spanking new in the scheme of things,
Yes,
right? A few hundred years old or less. And yet we're looking at the New Testament, a couple thousand years old, that is just, in other words, we have so much more evidence for, let's say, Mormonism than we do for the New Testament. And yet the very same people who will argue that the New Testament is for sure true will say that the Book of Mormon is wrong.
Right.
And that was the mirror reflection back to me to finally see my own faith tradition.
Right.
And become critical thinking about it.
Yeah. Right.
That came to an inevitable conclusion.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I would agree with that. And to kind of circle back to something you said, it made me think, when my Christian friends, so like just people from high school on, like, because I came out is not believing in Mormonism anymore. My evangelical friends swooped in.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And a lot of the things I said is, well, you just didn't know the real Jesus.
Right.
You prayed to the wrong Jesus. And I remember thinking, well, then Jesus is a dick. Like, really, because I was like hurting and in pain, right? And I was taught that Jesus takes away your pain and that you can give it to him, right? Put it at his feet. And if there is a Jesus or a God, or however you want to word that, that is like, oh, you were taught the Mormon way, which isn't the same way as this one over here. And so Jesus isn't going to listen to you. Like, to me, that was like the most illogical type of thinking that I could wrap my head around. I was like, well, then who's Jesus? If he's going to be a dick and only listen to the people who were in this particular, like, if there's a Jesus,
right,
that's not a very Christ-like person.
Yes.
I didn't pray right, or I didn't say the right words, or I didn't do this, like, yeah. So for leaving Mormonism, that was a lot more emotional for me than the transition to a non-belief in a God.
Okay.
Because I had to, like, and I don't know if you were going in this direction, but this is great. So emotional with the Mormon thing. And we were taught that, like, the Catholic Church was the horror and abomination, like, that's like all of that. So like, and Joseph Smith, when he went to pray in the sacred grove, I don't know how familiar you are with the story, he was asking which church to join, and the answer that he got was that they're all wrong. Don't join any of them. So that, of course, start your own. What's the difference? So it took several years. I mean, I left Mormonism, made peace with that, mostly. Sometimes I still get angsty, but made peace with that. It's fine. And then just spent a lot of years in the space where it just, like, agnostic.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter. I don't have to have an answer. It's not really changing anything in my life if I know. But then for me, it was, I had to put the same, I didn't put the same study into Christianity as I did with Mormonism, but just the kinks in the
Yeah.
armor, so to speak, just crumbled very fast. And so, like you said, like at the beginning, I just went to church thinking, well, I can just pull out all the nuggets from about Jesus and about God and all of that, and it'll be fine. Until you start applying the same logic
Yes.
to the deconstruction you did over here with like Jesus and God and what that meant, to where, I mean, it's only been, it hasn't, I'm trying to think, I don't know if I've come out per se. I just, the language I use, I think is definitely atheist.
Yeah, and I know that there's so much baggage with that word that
Yeah.
not everybody, even if they technically would fit that term, wants to use it, and I get that.
Yeah.
I try to use as generic a term as possible. A non-believer.
Yeah. Because it's a scary word. It's very loaded. Yeah.
Absolutely, and part of my using it in the moniker is intentional.
Yeah. I love it.
Even this is kind of hackneyed and trite, but to try to normalize the term for
Right.
future people who need to come out.
Yeah.
But just that acknowledgement of, I don't think I believe that there is a deity of any kind is a huge
Mm.
step, right? That's a really
Yeah.
big step.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I know how scary that is. And I think it kind of goes to the teachings of Christianity. And whether doctrinally Mormons are that or not, I still believe they believe in a
Yeah,
Jesus who,
absolutely. Yeah.
died for the sins and all that. But I think that, I don't know, just being comfortable with not knowing and speaking about it, I was like scared that, like, oh, I might lose listeners or I might, but it's just how I felt leaving Mormonism. Like, I had to eventually get the confidence to step into where I am now. I mean, back then, like when I was leaving
Yeah.
Mormonism, meaning speaking it, coming public with it. I feel like it's the evolution of kind of saying I'm an atheist. It's like there are people who need to hear that, right? To feel that there's safety in that. And I do feel like the more normal faces, maybe that's a bad word. I don't know if I have a normal face or not, but like that we can have conversations about that. We're not evil. Like, I think it was so scary to think, oh, but atheists have, they've just like the lost cause. And I think that Mormons anyway, and I would imagine that's true with evangelicals, is like if you proclaim to be an atheist, they could be like, see,
Yeah.
we knew you went to the dark side. Like
Yeah.
we knew this would happen because you no longer have the spirit with you, or you've lost the countenance, or like all that type of verbiage.
Right.
So for me, I just thought, well, so far being my leaning into my authentic self has worked.
Yeah.
Like I feel better as a human doing that. And so I do consider myself an atheist. I might not know all the arguments about why Jesus or God and all of that and Christianity and the doctrine, but my logical brain is very comfortable in the, I don't know,
Yeah.
like I don't believe in that, you know?
This is the thing that I think is really important, that because the word atheist is so loaded and it
Hmm.
does evoke a picture of some angry person debating and trashing
Yeah,
someone's deeply held beliefs, maybe ad hominem attacking the person in
right.
some way in the process. I think it's much more important to just describe what you just said there, of just applying some logic of just, can this be true? Is it even possible from
Yeah,
my own perspective that these claims are true? And that
yeah.
process is kind of inevitable. The other thing that you've said that I think is really powerful is, near the end for me, I had a very similar feeling that you did. If my faith is worth anything, and I'd like for the listeners who are believers still to think through this as well. If your faith is meaningful at all, it should easily stand up to scrutiny, right?
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
the faith starts to break down, the problem is not the scrutiny, the problem is the faith.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that the church, or the Mormon church, or whichever organization, has so many defense mechanisms when somebody does begin to doubt,
Right.
to show people that that's wrong somehow, to stop them from doing it,
Yeah.
because it really is an inevitable path in some ways.
Hmm. Yeah. It's just so fascinating to me. Like, and to go back to what I was saying about like Huntington Beach and the evangelicals, to kind
Hmm.
of to your point there. I live fairly close to the beach, and we'll go down and walk, and there's always groups of evangelicals down there, and they'll be doing like these prayers, like someone will be there, they'll do all these things, and they'll even stand up and kind of do some preaching down near the pier. And I see it through such different eyes now. Like it just
Yeah.
seems so odd.
Yeah. Very much so. Yes.
Yeah, I just am like, I'm in awe of it. I'm kind of obsessed with it. Like it's kind of my thing right now where I'll watch some of the there's some Christian YouTubers out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes I'll just watch it and I'm just like, wow, like that's an interesting belief. Even though I'm coming from a place of
Yeah.
interesting belief
Yeah.
with Mormonism, but to see the whole Christianity through a non-believer's eyes, it's fascinating to me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To see the thought process in the mind. And leaving Mormonism was such a paradigm shift, like complete. I tried to put it back in the box. I tried to be like, well, it's just a belief and I'm still a good person and it's fine.
Yeah.
But you can't flip that again. Like once that switch is flipped, you can't see it any other way.
Absolutely.
And so that's how I feel about Christianity at large too. It's just I can't see it like I used to.
Man, that is so true that there's an impetus maybe early on to try to make it work.
Yeah.
I'm going to make this work somehow.
Yep.
But you cannot unsee what you have seen, and it changes everything.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like the Wizard of Oz pulling back the curtain.
Yeah.
Or what my favorite is the Truman Show.
Yes. Yeah.
The last scene of the Truman Show when he has his paradigm shift and he realizes and he walks up those steps at the very end and he opens the door. Of course, we never see what's on the other side, but that's exactly what it's like because you have to trust yourself enough to open the door.
Yes.
And that's the moment. I think even though it's scary as hell, that's the moment you can start trusting yourself more completely. And a lot of my clients will be like, well, how do I trust myself now? I built this whole life around this belief and now I don't believe it anymore. And look, I did it wrong, right?
Yeah.
So how am I going to know what to think in the future or what to believe in or what to, but I think the very fact that you went through that, that's brave.
Yes.
So brave to go when you don't know what's on the other side. That is so brave.
Yeah.
It's like fear is the tactic. It's everything, right? So when I was going to my bishop during my faith crisis, when I had questions, I went to several different bishops because this was over several different years where I lived in different places. And their answers just never made sense to me. Like, well, just go back and read the Book of Mormon and pray more.
Yeah.
I'm like, but I've done all that. And now I have these questions and we can't even talk about the questions. We just have to go kind of undermine. I think the things you feel are minimized, like whatever questions you have aren't important. You just have to have more faith, right? You haven't done the work or you must have sinned or done something that's blocking God working through you.
It's blaming the victim.
Yeah.
It's your fault for doubting.
Yeah. And you already feel so shattered.
Yeah.
And then to have that thrown in your face, like, well, you're doing it wrong. It's like, no, my heart, like that was one of the things when I was going through it that I did. I'm like, well, I can hang on to Jesus and I'll be okay. That can be the common ground. But like I said, that kind of fell by the wayside a few years later. Yeah, I think if people really knew what you really go through, there's just so much judgment. But, it's just like anything else, come walk in my shoes, you'll understand.
Yeah. And that's why we need each other.
Yeah.
I don't want to let you go without talking about the work that you're doing now. Tell us a little bit about what led you to be a public figure in the ex-Mormon world.
Yeah.
And then what are the areas that you're working in these days?
Okay. Well, I started in 2012 with my YouTube channel, and I can't remember now what it's called. It's like Amy Logan Post-Mormon Life, I think. And I made a ton of videos from 2012 to 2013 and 14, just sharing my story because I felt so alone during my journey, and especially not seeing women. I didn't see a lot of women that were speaking out at that time. Now there's a lot more, but back in 2006 to 2012, there weren't that many.
Yeah.
And I just thought if one woman at 2:00 in the morning who's bawling her eyes out because she's like, what am I supposed to do with my life now? I have these 6 children and a husband and this and that. And I thought if I can at least put a face to the feelings of what they're feeling like, then that's what I'm going to do.
Mm.
So I did that for a long time. And then I decided to just make this my career because it is a need.
Yeah.
You feel so lost and alone and confused and hurt and betrayed and, all of those things. And so I am now a life coach
Okay.
and I help people at whatever stage they're at. I have some clients who are like fresh, raw, cut open. They are hurting. It's hard to see the forest for the trees. And I have other clients who are like 10 years out who the psychological side of that is still weighing on them.
Yeah.
So it's called Exmormonology, but you don't have to be ex-Mormon. You can be ex anything and it still works. It's just, I know that language. I can speak to that very specifically. And it's an 8-week course that I take people through and give them coaching tools. I have some clients that just keep renewing and they like it because it goes so much beyond just religion. Like
Sure.
some of my clients, we don't even talk about religion because they are past it. But that is my area of expertise. Like I've been there. I have felt all the full range of feelings that go through it. And
Yeah.
so I am a certified life coach and that's what I do. I have my podcast Exmormonology that I just started this year to add that voice of calm because life can feel so chaotic when you're going through it. And so
Yeah.
the podcast is, it's a way to teach. And like my YouTube channel was a little more topical, sometimes things that the church would be coming out with and saying, like I had a big problem with the Mormon church's LGBTQ policy.
Yeah.
And I became very vocal about that and just the hell they put some people through with all of that. And so it's literally a passion of mine to help people.
So I just wanted to highlight, again, I recommend Exmormonology for everyone, regardless of your faith tradition background. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of episodes that I listened to recently that I thought were just really beautifully done. One from back in, I think December on grief. And there's so much grief in this process that I don't think we are prepared for before it happens. And while you're going through it, and as you just eloquently said, even 10 years later, grief can sneak up on you, right? It can hit you. And so I really love the things you had to say there. And then we're recording in the middle of April and a pandemic is underway and people are feeling isolated and alone.
Yeah.
And so you've recently done an episode that touches on that a little bit. And again, just really commend you on the empathy that comes through in podcasts.
Oh, thank you.
I really recommend for people to find this podcast, start listening to it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. You never know when you start a podcast what's going to happen, but it is starting to gain a little momentum. But just like you're doing a great job too. I think anytime you can help people who are grappling with things that you just never knew were going to come your way.
Yeah.
And that space in between an unbeliever and atheist, it's very small, but it feels like everything.
Yeah.
So I think the more voices we have that collectively are okay and comfortable speaking out about it, I just think keep going what you're comfortable with, whatever you feel like your voice is in that area. I think just holding that space for people no matter where they are along the journey, because it is a journey and it's constantly evolving. I geek out on this kind of stuff, so I can talk about it all day long.
Absolutely.
It's just fascinating because it's all that psychology of the mind, and that's a lot of what my coaching is wrapped around, is getting into those deep neural pathways that have been conditioned to think certain ways.
Yeah.
And the tools that I give my clients are to help them start creating new neural pathways, because it's easy to default to even our old thinkings around guilt and shame and I'm not enough, and like this, especially religiously speaking.
Yeah.
And so creating those new spaces in the brain and actually having concrete tools that help you do that, because what's so important is that we're all speaking our authentic voice. Like that's when you feel so free, and you don't feel bound by other people's thoughts. A lot of us are scared because we're scared what someone else is going to think about us, and that's basically handing them our everything, because we're scared of what someone might think about, and so then we hide or we're afraid to speak up, and really what we're scared of is someone's judgment on us, which is so tied with religious upbringing. So those of us who've gone through that I call it the residual effect. Like you have some old beliefs in you that you don't even know are still kind of steering the ship, because it's so deep in your psyche.
Yes.
I just love this stuff.
Absolutely. I just want to say, I think maybe we should do another thing together at some point and just talk
Yeah.
about the post deconversion,
Oh,
how
I would love it.
finding meaning, finding purpose, that kind of thing. That'd be
Yeah.
great sometime. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people don't know what to do with that because then like, well, then what? What if you believe in nothing? How do you have meaning? It's like,
right.
oh, it's just getting good. This is
Yeah.
good.
I will have links in the show notes for all of the ways that people can get in touch with you. And
Awesome.
Amy, thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing with us.
So great. Thanks for having me.
Final thoughts on the episode. I think you can hear in our conversation that Amy and I found a lot of points of comparison, a lot of points of similarities. And we're both very excited about the process of deconversion, of having gone through it ourselves, of recognizing it in someone else, and trying to help others go through that process as well. Again, regardless if you are a former Mormon or an evangelical or Muslim or whatever your faith background might be, Amy's work is fantastic and you should absolutely go find that and check it out. She has the podcast Exmormonology. She's got a YouTube channel called Amy Logan Life, and she is also a certified life coach, and you should reach out to her. I will have links in the show notes for you to find all of that information. One of the things I wanted to highlight here is Amy mentioned the ending of the Truman Show. I'm also going to have a link to the YouTube clip of that. That is an amazing analogy to deconversion. The sudden realization that everything you understood to be real isn't. And the terrifying nature of going out beyond the confines of the bubble you've lived in your entire life. Check out that video. Let Amy and I know if that is something that you relate to, if that feels like that was your experience with deconversion. I also want to remind you that I have the blog post, How to Deconvert in 10 Steps. That title is tongue-in-cheek. It really isn't prescriptive. It is definitely much more of a description of the stages that one might go through in the deconversion process. So please check that out. I'd really like to hear your feedback if you recognize yourself in that, or if it's missing something, let me know. And finally, one of my favorite quotes from Amy in this conversation, she says, I had this moment in my head where I was like, I'm an adult woman, I'm 36 years old. If the church is true, it has nothing to fear, and I get to figure this out. It was at that moment that I gave myself permission. And I mentioned in my story as well that I thought, if my faith is worth anything, it can stand up to scrutiny. The fact that it could not is not an indication that the scrutiny was bad. It is an indication that the faith has problems. Give yourself permission to ask the questions, to go and seek the answers. Even if at the end of that process you feel like you are more strengthened in your faith, that is a wonderful process to go through. I want to thank Amy for being on the podcast, for being so honest and sharing her story with so much heart and passion. Definitely go and find Amy's work. As usual, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me in being graceful human beings. Time for some footnotes. The song is a track called Waves by Micaiah Beats. Please check out her music. Links will be in the show notes. If you'd like to help support the podcast, here are the ways you can go about that. First, help promote it. The podcast audience grows by word of mouth. If you found it useful or just entertaining, please pass it on to your friends and family. Post about it on social media so that others can find it. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. This will help raise the visibility of our show. Join me on the podcast. Tell your story. Have you gone through a faith transition? You want to tell that to the world? Let me know and let's have you on. Do you know someone who needs to tell their story? Let them know. Do you have criticisms about atheism or humanism, but you're willing to have an honesty contest with me? Come on the show. If you have a book or a blog that you want to promote, I'd like to hear from you. Also, you can contribute technical support. If you are good at graphic design, sound engineering, or marketing, please let me know and I'll let you know how you can participate. And finally, financial support. There will be a link on the show notes to allow contributions which would help defray the cost of producing the show. If you want to get in touch with me, you can Google Graceful Atheist, or you can send email to gracefulatheist@gmail.com. You can tweet at me at gracefulatheist, or you can just check out my website at gracefulatheist.wordpress.com. Get in touch and let me know if you appreciate the podcast. Well, this has been the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Grab somebody you love and tell them how much they mean to you. This has been the Graceful Atheist Podcast.